The Maze Runner, if you didn't already know, is an amazing franchise based on teenagers stuck in a giant maze with no way to get out and no memory of their past self. To survive, they need everyone to do something productive every day to ensure they don't die from the horrors of the maze around them. Today, I'll be going over the 14 roles or jobs Gladers did in their time in the maze. Let's get it. We'll start with the first in command. They are the leader of the Gladers and the Gathering. The first in command was usually the Glader who had been in the maze the longest, meaning they had the most experience. Their responsibility was to ensure everything in the Glade was going well and call a gathering if it wasn't. Albie was the first in command when Thomas arrived, and Nick was the first in command before he passed. This brings us to the next role, the second in command. The second in command's job was to be in charge whenever the first in command couldn't. They were the leader's right-hand man and helper. Newt was the second in command to Albie in Group A, and it seemed that Sonia was the second in command to Harriet in Group B. Our third role is arguably the most important. This role is runner. Runners are the Gladers allowed to go into the maze and were usually the strongest and fastest kids. Runners would run the maze every day, trying to find a way out of the massive maze. The maps they made on their journeys were saved in the map room. They left when the doors opened in the morning and returned right before the doors closed. The keeper of the runners was Minho. Along with the physical attributes needed to be a runner, being a runner was also a very risky job as grievers often appeared during their journeys. According to Minho, there was always at least 8 runners, including the keeper. The runner's goal was to solve the maze and escape with the other Gladers. Our fourth role is builder. This role is pretty self-explanatory as builders were the ones who built and constructed the most stuff in the Glade. This can include many stuff such as structures and simple items needed in day-to-day life inside the Glade. They also upgraded and repaired structures as well as making them. Builders were said to be good at building, but not the smartest Gladers. The keeper of the builders was Galley. Next, we have cooks. Cooks were the Gladers responsible for preparing all the meals for the Glade. They spent a lot of time in the kitchen preparing meals for the hungry Gladers. Being a cook was a well-respected job as it was not easy work and required a lot of discipline to make that much food for so many people. Fry Pan was the keeper of the cooks. Our sixth role is Slicer. This was definitely a more gory job. If you like blood, you can be a slicer, was what Albie said to Thomas about the job. Slicers would feed and raise different livestock such as pigs, hogs, sheep, cows, chickens, and turkey. These animals were kept in pens in the bloodhouse area. Slicers would clean this area when needed. Slicers were the ones who slaughtered all the animals so they could be prepared by the cooks for eating. Winston was the keeper of the Slicers. All roles on this list so far are focused on survival, which I find interesting. I was surprised during my research that there wasn't roles focused on entertainment or, to be honest, weapon making. Especially with grievers in the dire need for runners to protect themselves, I'm sure they had something, but I think the builders could have been more useful and built more useful structures like defense mechanisms and maybe bases and sleeping areas higher up. I could be wrong though. The seventh role is bloodhousers. Bloodhousers would take the meat from the slicers and prepare it before handing it off to the cooks. This more grotesque job was not for the faint of heart. The keeper of the bloodhousers is not mentioned, but is theorized to also be Winston. Our eighth role is trackhoes. Trackhoes would do the hard work around the gardens. Trenching was mentioned as part of their job. Their work was not usually required, so they usually did other jobs around the Glade as well. Trackhoes would usually have to be quite strong, as carrying these heavy things for a while was no easy task. The keeper of the trackhoes was Zart. Our ninth role is gardeners. Very similar to trackhoes, their job was to prepare fruits and vegetables for the cooks. Their job was fairly important as anything food-related was. If they let the crops die out, they were eliminating a key resource. Gardeners also took care of the plants by weeding, pruning, and planting seeds. The keeper of the gardeners was not mentioned in the book. The 10th role is medjacks. Medjacks were basically the doctors of the Glade and were quite important as well. They presumably had to mend injuries either from slicers or the horrible injuries runners probably came back with. Keeping everyone healthy was very difficult, especially since there were only 2 medjacks. Clint, who was the keeper, and Jeff. The fact that there are only 2 medjacks infers that there probably wasn't a ton of injuries in the Glade, and most Gladers took care to stay healthy. This is interesting because one would imagine tons of disease would go around if a group of 40 or more people lived that close to each other for that long. It seems Wicked probably had a hand in that. The 11th role is the most embarrassing one for the people who did it, and also the lowest ranked job. This role is Slopper. Sloppers were the Gladers who weren't good at any of their jobs, so they'd help around the Glade as much as they could, which was mostly the dirty tasks most Gladers didn't fancy doing. This could include helping clean up the bloodhouse, cleaning the toilets, showers, kitchen, and more. The keeper was not specified, but we do know that Chuck was one. It's also possible they didn't have a keeper, as it's not a well-respected or really necessary job. Our 12th role is Breakneck. Breaknecks had similar responsibilities as the builders, but mainly repaired structures and buildings that had broken down as opposed to building them. Breaknecks need to be somewhat smarter and know how to repair what had broken. The leader of the Breaknecks was not specified. The second last role is Bagger. The Bagger role only existed in the book and did not make it into the film. Baggers were described as creepy fellas. Their job was to bury the dead Gladers. In addition to this, as the job wasn't needed too often, they also acted as police and guards around the glade. This was useful as they could make sure there were no conflicts and nobody left the maze without permission. The keeper of the Baggers was Billy. Our final and arguably the most important role was map makers. Their job was extremely important as they designed the map of the maze physically to a much smaller scale, as per the runner's research. Since the map was the most valuable and important item in the glade, they also helped guard the map room to see that nothing happened to it. Map makers likely had to show some creativity and artistic skills to nail the job. The leader is not specified and the map makers could be runners, but it is not confirmed. Those 14 things are every single role or job a glader could get upon entering the maze as a greenie. They each had their own usefulness and different skills were required for each one. I wonder how long it took for a glader to be assigned a job. A month maybe until the next greenie was sent in? Imagine gladers would have to do some sort of test or try out each job before being assigned one. If you went to the maze, what job do you think you'd be assigned? Or what job would you want the most? Let me know in the comments and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It's free and it really helps me out. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.